All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Chris Hyman and Luke Broadbold. We are on our Tuesday Red Room. I am in the Admirals Club in Miami, Florida. just, just coming back from a whirlwind of the Bahamas and Jamaica, and yeah, just a lot of good old times. And yeah, so I had to do this one in Miami International Airport. So,
I'm
but
jealous.
today we're talking about DSCR loans, market shifts, and all that kind of stuff. So, if you don't know what DSCR loans are, they're debt service coverage ratio loans. Typically, what happens is you have a rental property and it generates so much income you can refinance. Say if you're stuck with a guy like me on a hard money loan, you can refinance that property at a much better rate than my hard money loan prices, without having to prove all your income and all that stuff. And as Luke was going to tell you here in a moment, when you start getting 8 rentals, 10 rentals, and upwards, it's difficult to get those refinances done because you go traditional, they want to see all the income, and they want to see all your rental statements, and you can kind of do these one at a time. And Luke has been using somebody that is actually taking your Airbnb income, which is obviously significantly more than your typical rental income. So
it's extremely difficult to find. Yeah. First things first, I think that everyone here needs to know that yesterday Chris was at Rick's Cafe in Jamaica, cliff diving. So I think that just needs to get out there right now, just so everyone knows that Chris lives a sweet life. And I'm jealous. I called Chris. I was like, man, I wish I was jumping off cliffs at Rick's Cafe, probably a couple Mai Tais deep, right, Chris?
I typically on stuff like that, I had a couple red stripes, but on stuff like that, I'm not gonna do. I'm gonna do true. Like if I do my snorkeling, my diving, my piloting, driving boats, typically do it mostly alcohol free. But I'm sure that's
awesome. But yeah, no. So like Chris said, something that we're really trying to focus on here at Viking and Jake and myself is that. With the market shifting like this, we were in a position over the past couple of years where we were trying to buy pretty much everything. And as interest rates go up, it's just one of those things where the deals just aren't as good anymore. Unfortunately, just, when your interest rate goes from when we were getting investment property interest rates, we were somewhere in most of ours are between 4.5 and 5.2. So, I mean, if those are going to jump up to 6.5, you got to make changes. And so we still are trying to buy properties. Our thing is we don't ever want to stop buying, good properties. And I think we're still going to come across good ones. And Chris, I know you're the exact same way. But it's like, how we're kind of shifting in that sense, a little bit of what we're going to start doing is we're going to just kind of start, throwing out to the seller about if they'd be interested in taking on terms. Right. So I know I posted a little something about it the other day, but we picked up a triplex in downtown Prescott. We were going back and forth with the guy, and then we just threw out and asked if he'd be interested in taking any terms. And so he said, yes, I would. He threw out a 4.7% interest rate, 5-year balloon. So he'd carry us for 5 years. And we negotiated back and forth on the amount that he wanted down. So the purchase price originally he was asking for was $880. It came down to $800. We lowballed and we came in at $650. He accepted, and he wanted $100,000 down. So we went ahead and moved forward with those terms. Like I said, we were able to pick up a really nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a duplex in the backyard. We were able to pick up three units in this market right now, which is, again, it's kind of more difficult. You kind of have to navigate yourself. You got to be a little bit more careful with how you're going about it. So that's one thing that we're doing a little bit different, just in the sense of, being able to try to still continue moving forward on properties. So another thing is that obviously,
quick question.
Yeah.
Quick. So what's the cash flow going to be on a monthly basis?
So
on the 3 units.
Yeah. So we just rented the front house out this morning. We didn't do anything to it. It's on Mount Vernon, so it's in a really good area of Prescott. So it's on one of the most historic streets that's there. So we just rented the front house out this morning for $2,500 for a year. It's like I said, it's a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet. And we're going to put about probably 10 to 12,000 into each of the units on the duplex. We're just going to do new flooring. We're going to do new cabinets, and we're just doing butcher black countertops. So we're just making it, just basically just kind of throwing some paint on them, cleaning them up a little bit. So for those ones, we're expecting to get 1,800 each. So 1,800 each will be at, 3,600. So 3,600 and 2,500. So we'll be at 6,100. And our mortgage payment on this property, ready for this, Chris?
Ready. Let's go.
Mortgage payment is 2,900.
There you go. You got a double, right?
So 2,900, and we're pulling in 6,100 now. And so this was off of a property that, again, we knew we wanted it. We knew it was going to rent out for good numbers on it. So that's going to cash flow, after we pay water and trash, that'll cash flow somewhere right in that ballpark of about $3,000 a month.
Yeah. So if you wanted to, and you couldn't get the person to take the seller financing at the 4.7, you could go and use one of these debt service coverage ratio loans.
Yep.
And they would give you generally 80% of whatever your gross income is. So, just take 6,000, 80% of 6,000. I'm using rough math.
Yeah.
To be like 4820, I think is like maybe the exact number. Just
right. Yeah, no, but, exactly.
But so but as the market shifts, that's, doing subject to is something that other people can use. That's where you take somebody that wants to sell their house, but maybe they don't have a buyer because it's not a seller's market anymore. And especially if they're in distress, you can do the property subject to, and guess what? They have maybe a 3 or a 3.5, or maybe in a 4% mortgage that they've had for a couple years that they're sitting on. So basically you're buying the house subject to their existing loan, and you basically do a wrap on that. And, it's not something that I do because, and just so we're clear, I'm a licensed mortgage banker, and I know that the documents say that, that if you sell the house that the note's due on sale, right? So I don't do stuff that I know that, but if you're just doing this as creative financing, I know there's people that teach subject to classes out there all the time, and they're out there doing it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And so it's just another tool, but it's not a tool that I use personally, but it's definitely a tool out there that you can use to build rental properties and create portfolios. And who wants to pay back that 3 and 3.5% money?
Right, exactly. No, for sure. And so it's just, again, it's another one of those kind of tools that I just think that, if you can kind of, if you are still planning on buying properties, that I think that you kind of need to have in your tool belt a little bit, even if you're not extremely versed in it, if you can just kind of throw the option out there, because like Chris said, you're going to start having a lot of people now where their houses are not selling over asking anymore. They're not having these bidding wars for their properties anymore. And so I think you're going to start seeing houses that are going to be sitting a little bit longer. And like Chris said, if they're sitting at 4% interest rate, they might go ahead and say, give me a big chunk down. I'll carry you for 5 years like this guy did. And just say, you know what, and I'm going to make some money off of you on the interest as well. So, I mean, right now, if you can even get someone at 5%, even 5.5%, that's not bad at all. So,
let's just look at the wrap. Let's say you're a wholesaler and you wrap a property, and maybe it doesn't have a giant discount. Maybe it's only a 20% discount. And in this market, if you're not getting a 20% discount or more, you need to get more than 20%. But maybe you wrap that property at a 3% mortgage. Well, if they can't go replace that for something like 5.5, and let's just call it, a $300,000 property, you're talking 2.5% on $300,000. That's an extra, whatever is that, $7,500 a year. So that's divide by 12, and it's $600 a month. So that's a big difference. So $600 a month, so that's $7,500. You can create value by wholesaling a subject to, right? Especially if you can find end buyers that can't get financing or do want that 3% interest rate that they missed out on. Exactly.
And so, yes, I mean, and again, one thing that's been huge for us is that, when you're doing a regular Fannie Freddie loan, which that's what most people kind of do. Most people go the route where I'm going to get a Fannie Freddie loan. They're going to take a look at your income. They're going to take a look at obviously your credit. And I'm not saying DSCR, companies that are doing these don't do that. They're going to look at your income still, of course, and they're going to look at your credit. But the thing that's most important to them is going to be that like Chris mentioned earlier, that the payment is covered. So, I mean, if you can already show that you have a lease agreement in place that absolutely covers more than enough of what the payment's going to be, they're going to look at that more so than they're going to look at what your income is, which is really nice. And so that's going to open more doors for you. So, I mean, I think we're capped out with what our income is. Jake and myself, we're capped out with the amount of properties that we have versus our income for Fannie Freddie. And so the only the only other option that we have after, getting creative and looking at terms is going to be DSCR loans. Now, one thing is they're going to be a little bit higher in interest. And I think Chris, it's got to be just simply the fact that they're taking on more risk, right? I mean, they're taking on more risk.
Yeah, they're just basically basing it on the house. It's kind of more of a hard money loan, but they're basing it on the rental income of the house versus, your own personal assets and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's slightly more risk, but it's not hard money rates like my rates, that's for sure. So it's
right.
I think it's usually a half or 3/4 of a point higher, but if the asset can perform, then you can still keep adding to your portfolio.
Exactly. And so we just did a DSCR loan on 2 projects that we have here in Phoenix. Actually, one's in Phoenix, one's in Prescott. But I think we got locked in it was right at 6. I'm assuming it wasn't like terrible. It's not obviously what it used to be, but it was at 6%. But again, they took our Airbnb income on that property. So that is a huge thing that Fannie Freddie, these loans, they won't do that. They're not going to take a look at your Airbnb income and say, hey, I'll give you the full credit for it. Because what they're just going to do is they're going to say, what is or what is a regular tenant going to pay for that? So, and we all know that's a huge difference. I mean, on most of our Airbnbs, the average tenant is probably going to be willing to pay, I'd say $2,500 for our properties, maybe $3,000. But then Airbnb wise, these might bring in $6,000 a month. So obviously that's a massive difference. Chris, I can't even imagine what it is on yours because you've got luxury ones. I mean, that difference is probably insane.
Yeah, I know my rental income generally runs around $20,000 a month. So obviously, using $20,000 as an Airbnb income versus I think they rent for somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 on a long term. So it's double. So
exactly.
Anyway, someone asked what is a DSCR loan? It stands for debt service coverage ratio. So
I've got it pulled up. I've got the exact. I've got it pulled up right here. Debt service coverage ratio, also known as debt coverage ratio. Ratio of operating income available to debt servicing for interest, principal, and lease payments. It is a popular benchmark used in the measurement of an entity's ability to produce enough cash to cover its debt payments. So again, more so is going to look at the money that's coming in, the cash flow that's coming in on an asset versus all of the other things that people look at with a Fannie Freddie loan.
Yeah.
So it just opens more doors. It gives you more options.
And then, so this goes out on, once again, on the Phoenix RIA, my Facebook page, and then obviously Luke's Facebook page and Viking Real Estate YouTube channel. But if you follow the Phoenix RIA, I put out, Fortune Magazine did put out a post about Arizona and all the rest of the states. And it showed where, I don't know if anybody saw it, but, they said Phoenix, Arizona is highly unlikely to take a major drop. And someone did ask me like, well, we're already seeing price decreases. but if you look at our price decreases, if you read the Confer report, I think it was last month, it's basically just said that we have rewound to December of 2021. So we have lost all the appreciation that we had in 2022, because obviously it was moving up rather quickly like it always has.
Yeah.
But if it just withdraws to 2021 pricing, and it always slows down in fall. I think people forget this, that it always slows down in late summer and fall in Phoenix, Arizona. And inventory does rise. I think we're at 17,300. Guess what? We were at 17,000 and 18,000 back in 2019 and 2020. So don't forget that This is not something that it's not something we're not 60,000 like we were in 2009 or 10. So
yeah. And I think we've already seen, I mean, I personally believe we've already seen that 10, 15% drop. You know what I mean? From where we're at, I think that's already happened. And so, we're going to start running the numbers off of, where things are at right now. That's kind of, we're going to, hope it doesn't drop further. And I'm with you. I don't think it will. I think we've already seen that drop now. And so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And you still got to remember, we still have, a lot of people moving here. There was another article on Redfin 2 days ago that listed the top 10 cities of where people want to leave: Seattle, LA, Chicago, Boston, New York, and just, people want to leave these states, probably because of policy, but, where do all those people move to? They move to generally Florida, Texas, Arizona, and obviously there's some other states that get a huge influx of people, but Florida and Arizona are generally kind of 1 and 2 in that area. So you still have people moving here. It's not a bad thing. So
hey, Chris, I got a question here from John. John, how you doing, man? Good to see you. So you're gonna know more about wraps here. So say I had a house, Pronghorn Ranch, looking for 650. My mortgage is 1,600 at 3.75. Explain a wrap for me.
Repeat those numbers again for me. Sorry.
Looking for 650K. My mortgage is 1,600 at 3.75. Explain the wrap for me.
Okay, so you're buying it or selling it?
I think he's gonna be looking to sell, is my guess.
Okay, well, so if typically as an investor, you're looking to buy wraps, right? So if I'm an investor and you have a 16%, you got a 650,000. Your sales price. What's the loan amount?
Let me see. I'll ask him.
I mean, he's probably got a ton of equity. Right. So that
it's 295.
Yeah, so 295. So that's a ton of equity. That typically isn't going to fall under something like a wrap. What you would go for a wrap? Let's just say your loan amount's 295 and you just bought it for 315, right? There's not a ton of equity. So you borrowed 295. Let's just say you did, FHA 3.5% down or something like that. You don't have a ton of equity, but now John wants to sell, right? But he pays his 5% commissions and closing costs and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't necessarily have any money in there between the 295 and call it the 315 to really cover all those costs. So me as a seller, or me as a buyer on that house is like, hey, all right, well, why don't I just give you your 295 and I'm willing to wrap your mortgage at the, 3.5 or 3.6?
3.75, yeah.
Yeah, 3.5. I'll take your 3.75. Maybe I give you some moving money, like $5,000. Here's $5,000 cash. I'm going to take this to a title company and I'm going to wrap the mortgage. And now at me as the buyer, I have now this house that I could have bought I basically bought it, $300,000. I wrapped this mortgage, 295 at 3.75, and I have $1,600 a month. Now, let's just say I can take that. Maybe I can lease option it to somebody with $15,000 down as a lease option, or maybe I can get 10%, so $30,000 down as a lease option. I take that $30,000 cash. I replenish the $5,000 that I gave this guy for walking money, and my payment's $1,600. Maybe that lease option, and it's at Queen Creek, right? Maybe that leases out for $2,500. So now I made myself some wholesale income, and then I'm making money on cash flow on the property every month until they decide to buy me out.
Right.
And by the way, the number of people that buy lease options out isn't very many.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So John, I'd say that's more so from the buyer side, from how we can, how it makes sense for a buyer to jump on and do that. From the seller, obviously from the seller side, as yourself, obviously that's, usually it's going to be someone who's kind of going to be maybe in a bad spot or they need to get rid of it, but doesn't sound like that's you, obviously.
Yeah, so someone just asked, do you do that in an LLC or a land trust? Actually, the best way to do, I think, to do kind of wraps and stuff is a land contract or something like that is generally the way I prefer to do it.
Right. No, for sure. Got another question for you, Chris. We got, what does wrapping a mortgage mean?
You're basically just you're taking wrapping it or subject to. You're taking the mortgage. The house actually transfers into your name. Let's just use John, your guy that asked the first question, as an example.
Yeah.
I don't know what's his last name. What's his last name?
Tobin.
John Tobin owns the property, right? And he's got this $295,000 loan at 3.75. Well, what happens on a wrap is you send it to the title company, and then it transfers to, call it Chris Iman. We talked about, I wrapped that $270,000 mortgage. It's in my name, but the loan's not in my name. It's still in John's name. And John took his $5,000 walking money. And now what you do is you need another piece of paper that's really important that kind of basically is a power of attorney that gives you the ability to call the insurance company, call the mortgage company, and all that kind of stuff. You now own the house. You have the loan in John's name. You're making the payment, usually set up through a servicing company.
Yep.
And you basically got into a rental with that $5,000 walking money that you gave John. Now you have the house. It's creating cash flow for you. And that's definitely a creative way to be buying houses, especially for sellers that might be in distress, ready to move.
Yep.
They put their house on the market and it's crickets, right?
It's
Which
not moving.
is happening.
Exactly. It's absolutely happening. That was the situation that we were just in, where we got that triplex. The guy put it on. He put it on, high, in my opinion. But I mean, again, it's one of those things where, if people have to move on something fairly quickly, they got to make a decision. You don't want to just sit there with all 3 units sitting empty. You're losing money every single month. And so, when you got to make a decision quickly, that's kind of when you can come in and say, listen, this is what I'm willing to do. If that makes sense for you, let's go ahead and move on it. And what it kind of is able to do for the seller is it takes it out of their mind for the next 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They now know, you know what, my payments are still getting made. I'm actually making something because I think they own the property free and clear. So they're making $3,000 a month on their property still, just like throwing some tenants in there and not worrying about anything because now they don't even have the rights to the property. And so so it can be a good option for someone, depending on the position that they're in.
Yeah. So someone also asked if we you use multiple disclosure documents. Yes, if you're going to go buy stuff creative financingly, I would get you could go take a guru's class and maybe they have the documents, but their documents are probably going to be, general to your area. You'd probably want to I would get a local attorney. I use Mark Zinman to get you a set of documents that would work for, you're going to disclose, and you just got to make it all out there and on the table so that it doesn't come back and, bite you at the end of the day. With the new law about wholesaling, they're obviously coming down on investors and disclosure and just real estate in general is disclosure, right?
Mm-hmm. That's the main thing.
And if you put all the paperwork right and you do it all and you disclose it all, then no one can be upset. And if you are doing a wrap, putting a termination on the wrap is probably a good thing because there was a story back, I've been in this business a long time. There was a story back, I want to say, 10 years ago, where someone had a bunch of wraps and kind of the people, as you can get information, they figured out, oh, this LLC that wrapped my house wrapped all these other houses.
Right.
You can go door knock. They went and door knocked all those and I really don't want to be in this wrap anymore. And then they kind of got a bunch of it was just one person. But then when they had 15 or 20 people that didn't want to be in their wrap anymore, they had enough. And the investor got a knock on the door and said, hey, you need to really get these people out. And now he's in a situation where he needs to refinance. I think he had 100 homes or something. Now he has to refinance 100 homes. And a short period of time with a government agency looking over his shoulder. Sounds
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
terrible situation.
Oh, absolutely. And then another point too that I think most people don't talk about because they don't never wanted to get to that point. But another reason why a seller might be willing to do that too, if they really know their stuff, is that if the buyer, if they default on that loan, if they default on it, however many times, they get to keep that down payment, right?
Yeah.
So if that down payment, like in our case, that down payment was $100,000. So if we didn't make our payments a couple months, then and we default multiple times, that seller is going to take our $100,000, and guess what? He gets his property too.
Yeah.
So I mean,
But
it's you got to be careful there too.
another reason why why I use land contracts and wraps is, as a seller, let's just say John decides to sell the wrap way, and he lets somebody wrap his house. Well, if he sells it on a land contract, and this kind of protects the seller, not just the buyer, but if he sells it on a land contract and this buyer is Mr. Joe real estate investor, and he bought the crazy sports car and over leveraged himself, and all of a sudden now he's getting a divorce and now he's got problems. Where do you think he stops making the payment first? On his own house or on his wrapped house?
Exactly. 100% on
Right?
that wrapped house. No question about it.
It gives that seller on a land contract the ability to say, oh, you haven't made the payment, so I can cut you off. I don't have to foreclose on you. Bye-bye. It's my house back again. So It's really the land contract sells. But I also, you want to make, I've had plenty of people that have sold on a wrap, and then the same situation happens. The buyer is not making the payment, but the seller doesn't have any recourse. Now they have bad credit because the payment didn't get made.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Now the payment's not. And then
That's
I've had sellers call me and say, hey, I let them wrap the house. It's going into foreclosure, and I'm going to end up with a foreclosure on my record. How do I take the house back? And I'm like, there is no way unless you sold it on a land contract versus a true wrap. So,
right.
I think it's better. A land contract's the best way to do it. You can wrap it, but anyway, it just protects the seller in case people get shady.
For sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me see if we got any more questions here. No, I think I got all my questions answered over on my side here.
Nice. Well, yeah.
Heck yeah.
I'm back to work. I just spent a week in the Bahamas and 3 days in Jamaica, and now I got to go back to work.
Guys, Chris also just got married, just so everyone knows. So congrats to Chris for getting married. Chris, I wish I had a shot in here so we could take a shot together for your marriage.
Yeah. I've just been drinking for 9 days. I'm ready to just detox and go to the gym.
I can imagine that. I can see that.
I think I'm gonna
that's the time to do it.
I think I'm doing a 21-day cleanse.
When you get married, I think that's probably the best time to really make sure you go to town in there.
Yeah.
So cool.
All right. Well, if anybody has any ideas on what they want us to talk about, we love hearing from people.
Oh yeah.
We can usually or any if we don't know about it, we'll bring on a guest speaker that does know about it. As a matter of fact, I got to bring on Mark Zinman for. I ran into him just before I left on just the state of evictions, and obviously I haven't done one of those in a year. I had him on last year, so just the state of evictions on now that COVID has kind of come out of the system. And,
yes, exactly.
So
sounds good. Looking forward to it. Let's do it.
All righty. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for watching.
Appreciate it.
All righty.
All right, later, Chris.